Hello, history enthusiasts, and welcome to History Love, the channel where the past comes alive. Here we dive deep into the fascinating stories, pivotal events, and remarkable figures that have shaped our world. So, sit back, relax, and join us as we journey through time and bring history to life. The history of Scandinavia. Prehistory of Scandinavia. From ice and stone to civilization. Act 1. The glaciers recede, 12,000 BC, 8000 BC. The story of Scandinavia begins in the shadow of the Ice Age, a frozen wilderness shaped by glaciers towering miles high. Around 12,000 BC, the climate began to warm, and the great ice sheet slowly retreated. Beneath the melting ice, a rugged landscape emerged. Fjords, jagged coastlines, dense forests, and fertile plains formed the backdrop for the earliest human arrivals. The pioneers. The first humans arrived around 10,000 BC, likely following migrating herds of reindeer across land bridges that connected Scandinavia to mainland Europe. These nomadic hunters, armed with flint-tipped spears and bows, braved the harsh conditions to carve out a life amidst this untamed wilderness. Campsites at places like Amarnes in Sweden and Hensbacka in Norway reveal their lifestyle. Small, mobile communities surviving on a diet of game, fish, and gathered plants. Act 2. The Mesolithic Era, 8000 BC, 4000 BC. As the climate continued to warm, Scandinavia transformed into a lush, temperate environment teeming with wildlife. This era marked a turning point as humans began to adapt to their surroundings in more sophisticated ways. The Moglamosian culture. Named after discoveries in Denmark, the Moglamosian culture thrived during this time. These people crafted tools and weapons from bone, antler, and flint, using advanced techniques to hunt and fish. Evidence of their ingenuity includes dugout canoes, harpoons, and fish traps, revealing their mastery of Scandinavia's waterways. Shifting landscapes. Around 6200 BC, a sudden climate event known as the 8.2 kilo-year event caused a brief return to colder conditions. Rising sea levels flooded vast areas, creating the Baltic Sea and reshaping Scandinavia's geography. Despite these challenges, the resilient Mesolithic peoples adapted, their cultures becoming more diverse and regionally distinct. Act 3. The Neolithic Revolution, 4000 BC, 2000 BC. A transformative wave swept through Scandinavia as agriculture spread from southern Europe. The introduction of farming, pottery, and permanent settlements marked the beginning of the Neolithic era. The funnel beaker culture, TRB. The funnel beaker culture, named after its distinctive pottery, emerged as the dominant Neolithic society in Scandinavia. These early farmers cultivated wheat and barley, raised livestock, and built megalithic monuments, stone tombs that still stand today. Sites like Ale stones in Sweden and Kivik's tomb are enduring symbols of this era. Conflict and cooperation. The arrival of agriculture wasn't without conflict. Hunter-gatherer communities clashed with farming societies, competing for resources. Over time, these groups began to coexist, trading goods and knowledge. Act 4. The Bronze Age, 2000 BC, 500 BC. The Bronze Age heralded a new chapter in Scandinavia's prehistory, marked by technological innovation, trade, and cultural flourishing. Trade and wealth. Bronze, a metal alloy of copper and tin, was introduced to Scandinavia through trade routes connecting it to southern Europe. Wealthy elites emerged, controlling access to valuable resources and commissioning intricate bronze artifacts. These include swords, shields, and ceremonial items, many of which were buried in graves to accompany their owners into the afterlife. The rock carvings of Bohuslän. One of the most remarkable legacies of the Scandinavian Bronze Age is its rock carvings, particularly those at Bohuslän in Sweden. These carvings depict ships, warriors, animals, and abstract symbols, offering glimpses into the spiritual and social life of the time. A maritime people. The sea remained central to Scandinavian life, as evidenced by depictions of longboats in rock art. Trade, fishing, and exploration defined the coastal communities, laying the foundations for the seafaring traditions that would later dominate the Viking Age. Act V. The Iron Age, 500 BC, AD 800. The final stage of Scandinavian prehistory, the Iron Age, set the stage for the region's historic era. Iron and warfare. Iron tools and weapons became widespread, revolutionizing agriculture and warfare. Hill forts and fortified villages sprang up, reflecting a time of increased conflict and competition. Societies became more hierarchical, with powerful chieftains ruling over communities. Cultural exchange. Scandinavia became more connected to the wider world, trading amber, furs, and slaves with the Roman Empire. Roman influence is evident in the adoption of coins, glassware, and even Roman-style weapons. Sacred rituals. Religion played a central role in Iron Age society. Archaeological finds such as the bog bodies in Denmark suggest complex rituals, including human sacrifice to appease the gods. Sacred sites like Apocra in Sweden reveal the spiritual life of these early Scandinavians. The prehistory of Scandinavia is a story of resilience, ingenuity, and transformation. From the icy wilderness of the Ice Age to the thriving societies of the Iron Age, it is a tale of survival against the odds, shaped by the land and sea. This rich tapestry of human experience laid the foundation for the Viking Age and the rise of Scandinavian kingdoms. The Viking Age, Scandinavia's boldest saga. Act 1. The Dawn of the Vikings, circa 800 AD. In the late 8th century, the whispers of change began to echo across Scandinavia. A new era emerged from the fjords of Norway, the forests of Sweden, and the islands of Denmark. These lands, rugged and untamed, birthed a people who would leave an indelible mark on the world, the Vikings. The Viking Age was ignited by a combination of ambition, innovation, and necessity. Overcrowded lands, shifting political landscapes, and a thirst for adventure drove these seafarers to look beyond their borders. Their sleek, versatile longships became their greatest weapon and ally, allowing them to raid, trade, and explore far and wide. Act 2. Raiders of the North Sea. The Viking Age erupted dramatically in 793 AD with the infamous raid on the monastery at Lindisfarne, an event that sent shockwaves across Europe. Monasteries, rich in gold and poorly defended, became prime targets for Viking raiders. The art of raiding. Viking raids were swift and ruthless. Longships, capable of navigating both open seas and shallow rivers, allowed them to strike deep into foreign lands. From the British Isles to the coasts of France, Spain, and even Italy, Viking warbands became a feared force. However, raiding was not merely about plunder. It was also a means of asserting power and prestige. Viking chieftains and kings such as Ragnar Lothbrok and Harald Fairhair used the spoils of war to consolidate their rule at home and reward their followers. Act 3. Traders and explorers. While the Vikings are often remembered as raiders, they were also shrewd traders and daring explorers. Scandinavian merchants established trade networks that spanned from the Arctic Circle to the Middle East. Trading hubs. Centers like Hedeby, Denmark, Birka, Sweden, and Koppang, Norway, thrived as bustling trade hubs. Goods such as furs, amber, and walrus ivory were exchanged for silver, silk, and spices. Viking merchants were skilled negotiators, navigating the markets of Constantinople and the bazaars of Baghdad. Exploration and discovery. The Vikings were also unparalleled explorers. Norwegian sailors, led by Eric the Red, settled Greenland, while Leif Erikson is believed to have reached North America, Vinland, around 1000 AD, centuries before Columbus. These expeditions showcased their maritime prowess and unyielding spirit of adventure. Act 4. Societies of the North. The Viking Age was not only about outward expansion, it was also a period of significant development within Scandinavia. Clan-based communities. Viking society was organized around kinship and loyalty. Clans, or families, were the basic social units, bound together by shared ancestry and mutual defense. At the top of the hierarchy stood powerful chieftains and kings, who commanded loyalty through their strength and generosity. Law and governance. Despite their reputation for chaos, Vikings were deeply committed to law and order within their own communities. Assemblies called things were held to resolve disputes and make decisions. These gatherings were precursors to the democratic traditions seen in modern Scandinavian countries. Art and culture. The Vikings were skilled artisans, creating intricate jewelry, weapons, and carvings. Their art, characterized by interwoven patterns and animal motifs, reflected their connection to nature and the divine. They also valued storytelling as evidenced by the rich oral tradition that later inspired sagas and eddas. Act V. The Road to Christianity. As the Viking Age progressed, the old gods of Asgard began to give way to the Christian faith. Contact with Christian Europe through trade, raids, and settlement exposed Scandinavians to new religious ideas. Conversion of kings. Leaders such as Harald Bluetooth of Denmark and Olaf Tryggvason of Norway played pivotal roles in the Christianization of Scandinavia. They embraced the new faith for both spiritual and political reasons, using it to unify their realms and strengthen ties with Christian neighbors. Coexistence and conflict. For a time, paganism and Christianity coexisted uneasily. Old rituals persisted, often blending with Christian practices. However, by the late 11th century, Scandinavia was firmly part of Christendom, and the Viking gods were relegated to myth. Act 6. The Decline of the Viking Age, circa 1050 AD. The end of the Viking Age was not marked by a single event but rather by a gradual transformation. Centralized kingdoms. As Scandinavian kingdoms became more centralized, the power of local chieftains diminished. Kings like Knut the Great and Harald Hardrada sought to consolidate their rule, bringing an end to the era of independent Viking raiders. European resistance. Increased resistance from European powers also played a role. Fortified towns and organized armies made Viking raids less profitable and more dangerous. Integration into Europe. By the mid-11th century, Scandinavia had become integrated into the broader European cultural and political sphere. The Viking Age gave way to the medieval period, where Norse influence endured but in a more subdued form. The Viking Age was a time of unparalleled adventure and transformation. It was an era where Scandinavian ingenuity, courage, and ambition reshaped the world. From the icy fjords of Norway to the bustling markets of Constantinople, the Vikings left their mark on history as raiders, traders, explorers, and pioneers. Their legacy lives on in the stories they told, the artifacts they crafted, and the lands they settled. The sagas of the Viking Age remind us of the enduring power of human ambition and the call of the unknown horizon. The Kalmar Union, 1397 to 1523, a fragile dream of unity. Act 1. The birth of a union. In the late 14th century, Scandinavia faced threats from external forces and internal instability. The Kalmar Union was forged in 1397 under Queen Margaret I of Denmark, uniting Denmark, Norway, and Sweden under a single monarch. It was an ambitious attempt to create a powerful, unified bloc capable of standing against European rivals like the Hanseatic League and German states. The coronation of Eric of Pomerania in Kalmar Castle was a moment of hope and promise. Yet, beneath the surface of unity lay simmering tensions. Each kingdom had its own traditions, laws, and ambitions, making the union fragile from the start. Act 2. Conflict and rebellion. The Kalmar Union quickly descended into discord. Denmark, as the wealthiest and most powerful member, often dominated the union, fueling resentment in Sweden and Norway. Swedish nobles in particular chafed under Danish rule, leading to repeated uprisings. The Engelbrekt Rebellion, 1434–1436, became a turning point, as Swedish peasants and nobility united against perceived Danish exploitation. While the rebellion was suppressed, it exposed the cracks in the Union's foundation. Tensions escalated into full-blown conflict during the reign of Christian II of Denmark, culminating in the infamous Stockholm bloodbath, 1520, where dozens of Swedish nobles were executed. This act of brutality sparked widespread outrage, rallying Swedes around Gustav Vasa, who would lead the rebellion that ended the Union in 1523. The 17th century, an era of ambition and war. The 17th century was a transformative period for Scandinavia. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden emerged as rival powers, competing for dominance in the Baltic region and beyond. Act 1. Sweden's rise as a great power. Under the reign of Gustavus Adolphus, 1611–1632, Sweden ascended to the status of a major European power. The Swedish Empire. Sweden expanded its territory through a series of successful wars, seizing lands in present-day Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and parts of Germany. The country's military reforms, including the use of professional standing armies and innovative tactics, made Sweden a dominant force in the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. Gustavus Adolphus earned the title of the Lion of the North for his victories, particularly at the Battle of Breitenfeld, 1631, where Swedish forces decisively defeated Catholic armies. His death at the Battle of Lutzen, 1632, marked the end of his personal leadership but not Sweden's ambitions. Queen Christina. Gustavus Adolphus's daughter, Queen Christina, ruled Sweden after his death. Known for her intellect and eccentricity, she abdicated the throne in 1654 and converted to Catholicism, a dramatic move for a Protestant monarch. Act 2. Denmark-Norway and the struggle for survival. Denmark-Norway, under the leadership of Christian IV (1588 to 1648), faced a challenging century of war and economic difficulties. The Kalmar War, 1611 to 1613. Denmark and Sweden clashed in the Kalmar War, a conflict over control of the northern trade routes and dominance in Scandinavia. Although the war ended in a stalemate, it highlighted the growing rivalry between the two powers. The Torstenson War, 1643 to 1645. Sweden launched another offensive during the Torstenson War, taking advantage of Denmark's weakened state. Sweden emerged victorious, forcing Denmark to cede key territories like Gotland and Halland in the Treaty of Bromsebro, 1645. Act 3. The Scandinavian War, 1675 to 1679. The Scandinavian War was one of the most dramatic episodes in the 17th century. It was part of a broader conflict between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, fueled by shifting alliances and territorial ambitions. Denmark, under Christian V, sought to reclaim lost territories, particularly in southern Sweden. While initial Danish victories gave hope, Sweden ultimately retained its hold over its empire, demonstrating its resilience as a great power. Act 4. The 17th Century Legacy. By the end of the century, Scandinavia was forever changed. Sweden had risen to prominence as a dominant force in Europe, while Denmark-Norway struggled to maintain its position. Both nations endured the economic and human toll of nearly constant warfare, but they also laid the groundwork for the modern states that would emerge in the coming centuries. The Kalmar Union and the 17th century were an era of dreams and destruction, where the pursuit of unity gave way to rivalry, and ambition reshaped Scandinavia's destiny. The competing visions of Denmark and Sweden, from the Union's collapse to the wars that followed, tell a story of resilience, innovation, and an enduring quest for greatness. The 18th century, Enlightenment and upheaval. Act 1. Enlightenment in the North. As the Enlightenment swept across Europe, its ideals of reason, progress, and individual rights reached the northern kingdoms of Scandinavia. Denmark, Sweden, and Norway each embraced aspects of this intellectual movement, though their journeys were marked by distinct challenges and ambitions. Sweden's Enlightenment vision. Under the leadership of King Gustav III, reigned 1771 to 1792, Sweden became a hub of Enlightenment-inspired reform. Gustav III, often called the theatrical king, sought to modernize the state by curbing noble privileges, promoting the arts, and implementing a constitutional monarchy. The Gustavian Opera House symbolized Sweden's cultural renaissance, while the king's reforms, though polarizing, pushed the country toward a more centralized government. His assassination in 1792 highlighted the fragility of his ambitions. Denmark-Norway's reforms. Denmark-Norway, under the reign of Frederick V and Christian VII, also witnessed the influence of Enlightenment thinkers. The era's most notable figure was Johann Friedrich Struensee, a reform-minded physician who briefly gained power during Christian VI's reign. Struensee's policies aimed to modernize the kingdom but faced resistance from conservative factions, leading to his downfall in 1772. Agrarian changes. The 18th century also saw the beginnings of agrarian reform in Denmark and Sweden. Peasants, long burdened by feudal systems, began to gain greater control over their land as governments introduced policies to consolidate scattered plots. These reforms set the stage for broader social and economic changes in the 19th century. Act 2. Wars and Rivalries. The 18th century was also a time of war and territorial shifts. The Great Northern War, 1700 to 1721. Sweden's aspirations as a great power came to an end in the Great Northern War, where it faced a coalition of Denmark, Norway, Russia, and Poland. The war culminated in Sweden's defeat, signaling the decline of its empire and the rise of Russia as a dominant power in the Baltic. The struggle for stability. Denmark-Norway sought to regain territories lost to Sweden but faced mixed results. The country also maintained a precarious neutrality in European conflicts, leveraging its strategic location as a trade advantage. The 19th century. Nationalism and Transformation. Act 1. Independence and Unity. The 19th century marked a turning point in Scandinavian history, as the forces of nationalism and modernity reshaped the region. Sweden and Norway's union, 1814 to 1905. The Napoleonic Wars profoundly impacted Scandinavia. Sweden, weakened by centuries of war, lost Finland to Russia in 1809 but gained Norway through the Treaty of Kiel, 1814. This union between Sweden and Norway was fraught with tension, as Norway sought to preserve its constitution and autonomy. The union dissolved peacefully in 1905, with Norway becoming fully independent. Denmark's challenges. Denmark faced its own struggles, particularly after losing Norway in 1814. The country focused on internal development and agrarian reform. However, the Schleswig Wars, 1848 to 1851-1864, brought national humiliation as Denmark lost significant territory to Prussia. Act 2. Social and Industrial Change. The 19th century was also a period of profound economic and social transformation. Agricultural modernization. Agrarian reform continued to shape Scandinavia, particularly in Denmark, where cooperative farming became a hallmark of rural life. The rise of dairy production and exports helped stabilize the economy and improve living standards. Industrialization and urbanization. Industrialization took root in Scandinavian cities, transforming Copenhagen, Stockholm, and Oslo into bustling urban centers. Railways, factories, and ports symbolized progress, while growing working-class movements demanded greater rights and representation. The Nordic model's beginnings. By the late 19th century, Scandinavian governments began laying the groundwork for social welfare systems. The rise of trade unions, political liberalism, and women's movements reflected the region's growing commitment to equality and social justice. The 20th century. War, Neutrality, and Modernity. Act 1. World Wars and Neutrality. Scandinavia's experience in the 20th century was shaped by its responses to two world wars and the shifting political landscape of Europe. World War I. Scandinavian countries maintained neutrality during World War I, avoiding direct involvement but facing economic hardships due to disrupted trade. Denmark, Sweden, and Norway struggled to balance their neutrality with pressure from both Allied and Central powers. World War II. The Second World War brought greater challenges. Denmark and Norway were invaded by Nazi Germany in 1940, with Denmark surrendering quickly and Norway enduring 5 years of occupation. Sweden managed to maintain its neutrality but faced criticism for allowing German troop transports and trading with Axis powers. In contrast, Scandinavian resistance movements played a vital role in undermining German control, and the war strengthened post-war resolve to promote peace and cooperation. Act 2. Post-war recovery and the welfare state. The post-war years saw Scandinavia emerge as a global leader in peace, democracy, and social welfare. Economic growth and the welfare state. The region experienced rapid economic recovery, driven by industrial innovation, trade, and social reform. The Nordic welfare model, characterized by universal healthcare, education, and social security, became a defining feature of Scandinavian societies. The Nordic Council, 1952. The establishment of the Nordic Council symbolized a new era of cooperation. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Iceland worked together to promote regional unity and shared values, emphasizing neutrality and peaceful conflict resolution. Act 3. Modern Challenges and Achievements. The late 20th century brought new challenges and opportunities. Environmental leadership. Scandinavia became a pioneer in environmental protection and sustainability, implementing progressive policies to combat climate change and promote renewable energy. Cultural influence. Scandinavian culture flourished in the global arena, from the design aesthetics of IKEA to the literary success of Nobel laureates. The region's contributions to music, cinema, and technology further cemented its global influence. Equality and inclusion. The 20th century also saw strides in gender equality and LGBTQ+ rights, with Scandinavia often leading the world in progressive social policies. The history of Scandinavia from the 18th to the 20th century is a tale of resilience, innovation, and transformation. From the intellectual currents of the Enlightenment to the wars and social revolutions of modernity, the region evolved into a beacon of peace, prosperity, and equality. Scandinavia's journey is not only a chronicle of survival but also an enduring testament to the power of cooperation and progress. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from the past. Until next time, keep the love for history alive.